Chapter 8. Zeke paused to wipe the sweat dripping down his temple. For the first week of April, he hadn't expected temperatures in the upper 80s. Shoving the handkerchief into his back pocket, he shouldered the mattock. Swinging it in a wide arc over his head, he brought it down into the earth wall. He was working the clay pit, as promised. It wasn't much of a pit. The clay was found directly under a thin layer of topsoil and didn't require digging very deep. He tore at the side, widening the pit rather than digging down. Chunks of brown clay fell around his feet as he hacked at the wall. Sometimes small clods stuck to his mattock, while other times large sections opened up and exposed worms and beetle tunnels that fascinated him. When the mess around his feet grew to the point of getting in his way, he used a flat shovel to transfer the clay into the cart behind him. His job was to keep breaking down the clay and loading carts. Intermittently, another man came to take a cart and exchanged it with an empty one. While Zeke worked, he listened to snippets of conversation around the yard, hearing laughter and good-natured jokes. Occasionally he heard a shout for attention. Though the labor was strenuous, the men enjoyed their work. A man named Jonas worked the pit nearby. Zeke watched how he maneuvered and took his cue from him regarding how to handle the tools and the pace to set. It wasn't complicated work, but it was tiring. Zeke's back strained, lifting the mattock again. Weeks of travels had not prepared him for this type of labor. Riding in the saddle was tiresome in its own right, but it didn't require the strength needed for this career. The years of running behind the plow and pitching hay were not for the lazy, but the continual motion of lifting, swinging, pulling, and shoveling had awoken a number of muscles he didn't know he had. Swing, thump. His clothes were smeared with clay. Chipmunk wasn't kidding about the laundry service. He added laundry service to his growing list of expenses. He wondered what she was doing right now. Miss Palmer mentioned that Luke's father worked here, but he hadn't yet been introduced to a Mr. Davidson. For that matter, the few men he'd met hadn't used last names. Swing, thump. Not Jonas. He lived across the hall from Zeke at Palmer Boarding House. He was young, stocky. For breakfast, he'd eaten 3 plates of eggs, tossed down a second cup of coffee, and was out the door in a hurry. Zeke hustled to catch him. 5 other men were living at Palmer's. Her boys, she called them. They were polite to the ladies and courteous at the table, but on the walk over this morning their talk turned to less savory topics. Zeke's ears burned thinking of the picture Charles had passed around. Jonas, Bill, Charles, and Thomas lived at Palmer's, along with Simon Oakfield, whom he had already learned to keep a wide berth. All were young and unattached. He looked forward to their camaraderie for the few days he'd be in town. It was great to have a few fellows around, yet he was glad none of them belonged to Mrs. Davidson. She deserved better. Swing, thump. She wasn't married to D. Williams, the foreman. Dee's wife came by yesterday afternoon. She was well into the family way with a young toddler in her arm who sat on her round stomach. She passed the child to Dee, and 2 other boys played around her skirts. Jonas confided there were 3 boys of theirs already in school. Their 7th child would arrive sometime this summer. The toddler left a wet mark on Dee's shoulder from where he'd been chewing on his shirt. Dee either didn't notice or didn't mind. The boy wanted down, but Dee held him firmly, pointing out the kill and speaking into his ear. The little boy stared at everything, but did not fight his father again. Swing, thump. A few older men worked here. Most were scruffy and spit tobacco juice along the path. Their hands were gnarled from years of lifting and loading bricks. They were old enough to be Mrs. Davidson's father or grandfather. Surely none of them were Mr. Davidson. Swing, thump. The boss spent the morning in the office. A shipment of coal was due from the train this week. He'd assigned a crew in charge of transferring it with the horse carts. Surely she's not married to the boss. If she is, you'd better pray she keeps her mouth quiet. Daydreaming about the boss's wife could get a man in trouble. "What are you doing?" said Dee, startling Zeke, causing him to drop the mattock and yanking him into the present. You've got so much clay piling around your feet that you're mashing it into the ground. We're not paying you to bring down the hill. We need the clay in the carts and move to the yard for mixing." Dee mimed with both hands, motioning where the clay was to go. Zeke leaned the mattock against the wall, switched to the shovel, and began moving the clay to the carts. Nervous about being scrutinized, clods fell off the shovel before making it to the cart. He mumbled an apology. "Sorry, got distracted." "Zeke, look at me. This is the simplest job in the yard. It takes zero finesse or skill. Break the clay, load the carts." "Yes, sir." He worked quickly and tried not to step on any large pieces around his feet. "Stop a moment, will you? You look like a frantic badger trying to clean his room before his ma sees it." Dee chuckled. "I've already seen it." He took the shovel from Zeke and jammed it into the ground. "Sit down. You're wearing me out." Zeke obeyed. Sitting on the ground, he rested his back against the wall of the pit. "Jonas," Dee said, "hold up. I'm putting you on water boy duty. Make the rounds." Jonas nodded. He was probably relieved for the break as he jogged to the pump and bucket. Dee crouched beside Zeke and leaned into the little bit of shade still available from the wall. "I don't know your story, where you're going or where you're from, but I know Boss likes you." Removing his flat-brimmed hat, he finger-combed his white blonde hair, careful not to disturb the pencil tucked above his ear. "He hired you, but if you can't do this job, I can sure fire you." Zeke looked across the brickyard. He could see the whole operation. The brickmakers pressing the mixture into the molds, a man working the mixer, the office, the coal bins near the 3 kilns, and the drying sheds. There was a lot of action for a small area. A flash of blue caught his attention. "When did Chipmunk get here?" She was talking to a man near the sheds. Ralph? Ray? He couldn't remember the man's name. He was young, her age at least. They were laughing together. The man leaned toward her and whispered. Her hands flew to her mouth, but they did not cover the squeal of excitement Zeke heard from across the yard. She bounced on her toes a few times like a schoolgirl. Ralph or Ray pulled a scrap of paper from his pocket and gave it to her. Pressing it into her hand, he didn't let go. He held her fist closed with both of his hands as he talked to her. She smiled and nodded before tucking the note in her pocket. The man brought her hand to his mouth and kissed it. "That ends the search for Mr. Davidson." Suddenly, Zeke realized his supervisor was still talking to him. "Bring down the unicorns, and mermaids will make the bricks with their magical powers, and we can all sit around like this the rest of the day." Zeke tore his gaze from Mrs. Davidson. "Excuse me?" "I was testing you." Dee clamped his hat back on his head. "You failed." Dee stood and offered his hand to Zeke. "Dream about girls on your own time. Miss Eloise is... Just mind your work. My wife doesn't like it when I fire people, so I'd rather not."
The note from Roy Swenson burned in her pocket the rest of the morning and afternoon. Eloise fed Luke, then cleaned and started a pot of beans for supper while he napped. Eloise was glad to be the bearer of such a message. Jessica would be ecstatic. Though Roy was oblivious to Jessica's attention, he had been a mutual friend of theirs for years. The town dance on Friday would be worth attending, just this once, to witness her friend's official first outing. Thus do I pine. Eloise smiled, thinking of their school years when Roy chose Shakespeare's Sonnet 75 for his poetry memorization. Jessica's heart melted when he looked at her during his recitation and convinced herself he was speaking directly to her. At nearly 4 o'clock, Eloise managed to get Luke out the door to Palmer's. They passed near the schoolhouse and were joined by Simon Oakfield, the teacher of the primary grades. He smiled upon seeing her. Eloise inwardly cringed and prepared for the chatter she was expected to participate in. She chided herself for not getting out the door sooner in order to avoid this exact situation.
"Miss Eloise, it is a pleasure to see you today. You are on your way to visit Miss Jessica? I have not enjoyed your company for some time. I am honored to walk with you."
Simon quick-stepped to catch them. He was always proper, always the gentleman. Since grammar school, she had begun the practice of biting her cheek and tightening her middle to keep from saying something she shouldn't when he was near. "Yes," was the best she could come up with in reply. Luke dawdled, and she slowed to accommodate him. "I trust your students are behaving this week?" Simon pursed his lips and pushed his glasses with his middle finger. He chuckled before answering.
"Oh, Miss Eloise,"
he said, formal with names, though they had known each other for years.
"It is April. Even the little girls misbehave this time of year."
"Honestly, can you blame them?" Eloise breathed deeply and gazed at the clear sky. "It's been a gorgeous week,"
"Mm-hmm,"
he said.
"Hot, if you ask me. We must learn to restrain ourselves, no matter the age or the weather."
Luke, walking between them, rubbed his handful of grass on Simon's carefully pressed suit. Simon eased to the far side of the boardwalk. The toddler laughed, thinking it was a game, and followed. Disdain showed clearly on Simon's downturned mouth. When Eloise saw his face, she tugged gently on Luke's other arm, and he resumed his walk. After a minute of uncomfortable silence, Simon began again.
"Miss Eloise."
She focused on the cracks between the boards and encouraged Luke to walk a little faster. She wished Tobias had splurged on one of those baby carriages that were so popular, for as often as she and Luke wandered around the square, it would have come in handy plenty of times by now, provided the wheels could make it over the mud or dust once they were off the boardwalk. Simon continued.
"I have noticed your absence from the town socials for quite some time."
She refrained from rolling her eyes. "Of course I've been absent. Why would I go to a dance by myself? Philip was dead, and she wasn't in need of dancing. No sense in dragging anyone else down with her." "Yes," she answered. Simon maneuvered in front of her, causing her to stop abruptly. Startled by his barricade, she was not prepared for his next statement. He snatched her free hand and held it between both of his. She immediately grew cold and clammy.
"Miss Eloise, I would be honored to escort you to Friday's social if you would be so inclined to go with me. There are yet 2 days to prepare. I know this may appear short notice. I understand how women can be, but you need not do much to please me. I enjoy you as you are. Miss Jessica may have something you could borrow for the evening if you have nothing on hand, though I should not speak of such things. I do not wish for you to be put out if you have not anything prepared in the latest fashions."
He stood, beseeching a positive answer. She looked over his slicked brown hair, parted perfectly straight and every strand in its proper place, even after a full day of teaching. His appearance was perfect, the gold standard, and yet everything about him made her cringe. He never did anything mean on purpose, and yet she'd always avoided him. In grammar school, he was the student who finished first, who volunteered for everything, who waited his turn, who raised his hand for every question. Nobody liked that person. She wasn't interested in a man who continually proved his worth. He'd put himself in this position with her multiple times throughout the years. She'd hoped her stance was clear by now. "Simon," she swallowed, tugging at her hand, "why would you ask me this?" He dropped her hand like it burned and stepped back, and his eyes grew large.
"I have waited for an appropriate amount of time. You are the one who did not adhere to the etiquette of morning dress for 6 months. Do I not have a right to extend an offer of my company? What am I to think of your behavior? I have seen you walk with Mr. Swenson and others, even this new fellow who has taken a room down the hall. I was appalled to hear him speak of you."
Eloise narrowed her eyes. "What does he speak of me?" Simon stuttered.
Not much, precisely. But when you were mentioned, he implied that you had met. I attempted to find out more, but he did not elaborate, only spoke of walking with you from the bakery. But you should be ashamed to be seen with a man like that, one whom nobody knows, where he's from and where he's going."
"He's from West Virginia. He's on his way to the ocean. And what is that to you? or me. Why are we even speaking of it?"
"We aren't,"
said Simon, exasperated.
"We are talking about how you flaunt yourself at every available man, but when a respectable match like myself makes a go at it, you shove me away. What have I ever done to wrong you?"
Eloise shook her head. "I don't want to be with you. Flaunt myself? Has he been living in a foxhole? Where does he even come up with this drivel?" Her teeth bit into her cheeks.
"Miss Eloise, I apologize for whatever has upset you. If I may start over, I desire to take you to the social on Friday. It appears you are in need of an escort."
"Simon, if I want to go out, I will go out, with you or without you, or by myself, or with my brother, or with Jessica, or I won't. Maybe I don't want to go out because of people like you." Simon straightened his shoulders and tugged on his coat as if he'd been personally insulted.
"I am appalled. You refuse to follow proper mourning guidelines, and yet you remain cloistered away from the world as if we are to blame for your misfortune. Philip is dead. You are free."
He gestured with his arms wide, showing just how free she was.
"Are you not at least a bit relieved? He was sick, Eloise. He was sick, and you of all people should know it. And now he is not. You do not have to live this way any more, as if he is still waiting for you at home. Can you not put that time behind you? You do not have to put up with him any more. Time to move on."
Lead fire flamed in her gut, and her chest felt like the life was being squeezed from her. She gritted her teeth. "I am not one of your students, Simon. If you ever speak to me again—" Her lip trembled. She bent and picked up Luke. Holding him tightly to her chest, she stalked around Simon.
Miss Eloise, I spoke out of turn. Please forgive me,"
he begged. With her eyes locked on the end of the street, she marched past Palmer's, turning at the corner before the tears found their way out. Luke squirmed, but she held him fast.